He really pushed hard. If there was one thing that Stephen Harper really did do was try and push hard for Senate reform, for example, all the way to the Supreme Court, only to have that pushed right back down. No changes were made. And, yet we
And
still.
I would just interrupt and say by what I would call a very arbitrary Supreme Court decision. Uh, what the reasoning in that decision, I've written about it. People can look it up online, but the court's reasoning in that it was very unpersuasive because it didn't change the nature of the Senate. It just said if provinces want to have elections, they can send the list of people who win them to the prime minister, and the prime minister still makes the appointment. So it was a very, very minor but important step forward, and the court just pulled the rug right. Not only pulled the rug out from under that, but said any changes in the future to Senate reform will require a constitutional amendment. And since Quebec would never consent to a constitutional amendment, it means Senate reform, for all practical purposes, is totally off, impossible. Will be impossible ever to achieve.
And so I
So
think.
all the more reason then to pursue the Alberta agenda.
And I think that's where I was getting at is like we've had a Western prime minister who could not accomplish anything on that firewall agenda. Not even, in my opinion, personally, the Senate reform was really just a token. It was a gesture of good faith, is what it was, to say that we can make some adjustments, changes, to, include the West a little bit more, recognize the value that they contribute, and yet the East and, all the way to the Supreme Court, whether the judgment was a good one or a bad one, the end result was we have no say. And that's not going to change with the Laurentian elite running Canada from the East. So even you mentioned Pierre Poilievre, and the fact that Pierre Poilievre, would have gotten in, should have gotten in. But what really would that have changed for Albertans?